All right, Digging for Wisdom playoff round 2 edition. I am the Wizord. There's the man that'll make you change your opinion. The good professor, Diggsy, main event Diggsy. He's main event Diggsy during the playoffs. That's why we call on him. He gets all those playoff opinions. Diggsy, I'm excited because it's time for the area round. We moved on to round 2. I'm going to stay excited until we're doing our last one. Then I'll be depressed. Then I'll be like, we're on to round 6, Diggsy. Here comes the tears.
But we got basketball season, Ward. What about the big story? I'm pointing to this. People can't see what I'm pointing to. It says top story, area round action. But how about your Plano East Panthers basketball beating Stony Point again?
Stony Point. You have their number. And that kid, what was that kid's name for Stony Point last year? I purposely turned on the Villanova game just to see him play. Oh, Mosley was his last name. Couldn't even get on the court. And then that's one thing as a college football player, we have got to wait a couple of years. But in basketball, if you're anything, you got to get on there. Plano East knocked the talent out of that kid. Now I can't get on the floor for Villanova, who's 3-2. What's going on? Why are we talking Plano East? We should be talking about the gosh darn playoffs, man. It's area round 2.
The point is, that's what you're going to talk about in 6 weeks. So you have a little bit to talk about in 6 weeks. You can create a, Digging for Hoops or something. Well, like a part 2 podcast. There's always, I looked at the great philosopher, Robert Earl Keen, who says the road goes on forever and the party never ends.
That's true.
Keep on trucking.
That's true. We won't be digging for hoops because you're Diggs. That means you would eliminate me completely out of the podcast. It would be hooping for wisdom, and then I'd find somebody.
Hooping for wisdom. There you go.
I'd have to find the hoop part of it.
All you got to do is talk about Allen every podcast, like I talk about Plano East, and you'll probably be doing pretty good.
You'll probably be all right. They are up there in the top, where they rank second or something in basketball. Again, we've got to stop. We got to concentrate.
They're beating those prep teams. When they're beating those prep teams, those dynamic prep teams, they're pretty good.
Dynamic prep. I don't even know where that school's. I know it's in DFW. Where is it located? I can't find it.
I think it's in Irving.
Here. It's in Irving. Is that the one that used to be I school? I don't know. Who knows what it is? We'll figure it all out in months. But right now we're worried about area round. A lot of our teams are going to head out west. Some are playing some games in the east. We have a big clump of teams that are playing each other in DFW, and those are probably the ones that we will concentrate on having cameras on. Diggs will probably be thinking about going to one of these games since he's obviously not going to see those Panthers. Again, why do I have to digging? I'm digging at Diggs is what we're doing here. I didn't mean to dig at you like that, Diggs. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But you want to start talking about some brackets, or how you want to play it? You want to play it like that?
Yeah, let's talk about brackets. I think the brackets are going to be a little bit less interesting this week. I feel like we've got a lot of pretty much no-brainer games going on. I think the first round was better than the second round as far as main event matchups go. But you know what? We're still going to talk about them because you never know. When you get this far, you never know what's going to happen. Every week, I made a tweet, and whoever runs that IHSS Twitter told me I'm doing a bad job or something because I was talking about some of the major upsets about Fairfield beating Orangefield or Orangeland or some orange high school, and Pilot Point, DFW zone, beating Mejia, which was a pretty big upset. So you never know, Ward. Just never know.
You never know. You never know what's going to happen. But we popped up our first one on North Crowley side of the bracket. And let's talk about, first of all, let's talk about North Crowley. Everybody's allowed a dumper game. I guess they had a dump half against Byron Nelson. They let them stay with them for a half, and then all of a sudden all heck broke loose in the second half. I don't think we're foreseeing anything like that with Odessa Permian, especially since Permian lost the flip and have to come all the way over here to take a foot to where. And then we have Coppell and Lake Highlands on the back end. Like Coppell in another thriller of a game where something was said at halftime. They turned that thing around for 28 in the fourth quarter against Prosper. Poor Prosper ISD. I mean, they got Walnut Grove, but in one full swoop, they put Prosper down in Division II in a tough situation that they lost, and then the team that put them there couldn't even compete really against Denton Guy, or who they played? They played McKinney, right?
Right.
Oh, okay. Well, they couldn't compete there. Gone. So,
Mr. Louisville ISD, Wizzy. We should call this the second half regional because our two big teams are second half teams apparently. Yeah. By the way, I don't like North Crowley flipping for this. And let me tell you why, Ward. Because if you look at this, it's probably going to come back to roost to them next year. Because you win that flip this year, in next 3 or 5 years, you got to go return that thing.
Yeah.
And I think this is their window, not next year or 2 years. This is their window. So next year, I think they might need that home game or having that neutral site game. So now they've committed themselves next year. If the same exact bracket happens and they play them in the second round, they got to go out there with perhaps not as talented of a team. So I don't know that I like that, Ward, in the big picture.
That's a good point. And you know, when we get to the next one, we'll be seeing that with Trinity, because now they're heading out to Legacy, like, because they won the flip this year. But yeah, they shouldn't have problems with it. That's a good point. They could go out there and they could throw all kinds of mojo stuff at them, and it's not going to work. North Crowley's going to get this one. I think we all agree with it. Go ahead, and if you search us out for locker room material, head coach of Permian, go ahead and put this up if you want to, but it's not going to happen for you. Let's talk about the Coppell Lake Highland game. I'm interested to see what kind of chances you give to Lake Highlands, if any.
You know, my thing with this game is it really is dependent on Coppell's playing style, because you saw that first half. And if you look at multiple games this year, Ward, Coppell has had a half where you're like, man, this team is beatable. You know, it's happened against Waxahachie. It happened against Prosper. If you get 2 good halves out of Coppell, they're going to win this game by 5 touchdowns. If you only get one half, they're going to win this game by 2 or 3 touchdowns. But if for whatever reason they're lethargic for 48 minutes, that's when you can see Lake Highlands, because Lake Highlands is good enough to compress the game with their running game and make this a little bit of an upset. I'm not putting this on an upset watch, but it's because Coppell has played so inconsistently. I can see where that happens. But I don't think Coppell is going to play 24 or 48 lethargic minutes. I think they're going to take care of business. But I can just see, because, again, there are times where they play a half and you just scratch your head, Ward, like, why is this team ranked so well? And then that second half locker room speech, they look amazing. They look like a completely different team.
Exactly. And they got the 3. Man, you're making me lose my voice, too. What's going on with us? Let's clear our throats and get this thing going. Now, both of these teams that we're predicting to win.
Use your producer voice, Ward. Use it. You're telling Pat Doney he needs to speak up, and you're giving him the business, Ward. Give the audience the business you give Pat Doney on Saturdays.
Doney, speak up, Doney boy. No, both of the teams we got winning there. They got 3-headed monsters in that backfield. They got people from behind center. You got Amari and Beckway, who's proven he can do things. You got Joshua Locke up on the other side. You got that speedy Lamborghini known as Daniel Bray. You got another shifty back in Cornelius Warren, and that's only when Chris Jimerson doesn't feel like throwing to Quentin Gibson. And if you saw the one touchdown Quentin Gibson had played, he's a running back too. They threw it to him, and he's like, I don't want to play the 60-yarder like a receiver. Let me run behind the line of scrimmage and make it like a running back. And he ended up going 60 yards for that touchdown too. We'll talk about that game if it happens in the next round. But, yeah, right now it looks like if anybody's going to have a game, it's going to be Coppell. And I don't think that they're going to lose this one. And it should be Coppell and North Crowley. Keep going.
I want to ask you a very technical question, Ward, because you're filming North Crowley and Byron Nelson. And a lot of people said, that there were some halftime adjustments made. I wasn't watching the game. I was keeping an eye on it. I was watching some highlights. I don't know that there were halftime adjustments made. I just think there's a little bit more focus, and a little bit more. Did you see any specific adjustments?
So. Well, what was happening is Byron was waiting for them to line up, waiting for North Crowley to line up on offense before they made their defensive adjustments, and that kind of worked for them to keep them down to 21 in the first half. Second half, North Crowley mixed it up a little bit behind the line of scrimmage there. They didn't kind of give any tells, if that's what you want to call it. And they went ahead and did their business in the second half, and the defense really stepped up to it as well. But maybe that was an adjustment, maybe not give up what they're going to do right from the get-go, because, Byron Nelson was kind of reading that and making some moves there. So I don't know. That doesn't explain for why Byron Nelson couldn't score, but that tells me why North Crowley could score more. A nice moment, even though Leo Almanza got a little bit hurt, the first person that ran down there to check him out, because he ran into the backdrop there. Good old Parker Almanza. You got to love family stuff like that, because one of my sons hits the deck, the other one's going to be like, all right, that means more playing time for me. That's just I guess that's how I raised him. I need to have my father's license taken.
I got their videos out, I'm going to put this on TikTok.
Yeah, exactly.
My brother's hurt or whatever. But I
exactly.
do the same for you, Ward. Like if you pull a hamstring while you're out there running and trying to I'll be right there running for you.
You
Got to take care of my Wizzy.
come down out of the press box and go out into the elements. That's my man for me. All right, we talked about now Trinity has to head to Legacy. Remember last year that was an overtime, maybe it was even 2 overtime game. It was a really fantastic finish, offensive showdown. They're going out that way this time to play them. Allen's taking on Richardson up at McKinney ISD. Richardson got their first playoff win since '92, so kudos to them. They're running into an Allen defense that's really, really clicking. I can't say the same about their offense, but their defense is clicking on all cylinders. And that's what wins you championships. That's what they've told me since I was a kid. What do you think about these two games?
In Villanova, they don't have defense wins championships. In Georgetown, do they have defense wins championships?
They do.
I actually saw a highlight of Georgetown football, and that looks like 4A football out there. Georgetown football. I don't know who they're recruiting out there. It is
Division III, and they had a Trinity guy there one year. I can't remember who it was, but I went up there in like 2010, and the guy was walking through campus, and he had a football jersey. It's like, hey, where'd you come from? I'm from Euless, Texas. You probably never heard of it. So I heard of it, man. You were on my show, probably. Who knows? But go on. Who do you think's going to come out of these two?
Taking care of business. I want to give a shout out to Jabari Wafer because I saw him against Plano East and defensive lineman for Allen, and he kind of gives me that Nikita Whitlock vibe. I mean, his name is like called about 20 times a game, and it probably could be called another 10, but you got joint tackles going on. He is a difference maker for Allen, and that defense is really, really good. And you kind of mentioned a little backhanded compliment. Well, what about their offense? I think that has to do with Louisville and how good they were. I kind of talked about how I thought this game might look like it did last year, like a 20-19, 20-17 kind of a game, but I thought it might be flipped. The problem was Louisville just didn't get the 20. Their defense did everything that they could do, but the offense got shut down by Allen, and they had, there was really no situation where you felt like, Louisville was going to have a sustained drive. Once you saw them kind of lock up, it was, Allen's going to take this one. So for Richardson, I think their offense is going to look much better against Richardson, unfortunately. And it's a great story. You get to the second round. It's about building momentum. This is 2 weeks of practice that Richardson's going to have to build into next season. And I think that's going to be pivotal for Richardson as they're trying to build their program and get better. But if you look at this bracket, it doesn't look like it's going to get any easier anytime soon. And that's kind of be a recurring theme we're going to talk about. Like with Rockwall, it seems like, at times they're going to run into a good team, or Waxahachie's going to run into a good team sooner than later. Well, unfortunately for Richardson, they're going to be running into a juggernaut for a while. But that's how you get better. It's checkers. It's chess, not checkers. I think Euless Trinity, speaking of defense, this is like 4 or 5 weeks now, Ward, where you're really seeing that defense get better and better and better. I think they're going to have a comfortable win against Midland Legacy. I think they're going to win that game by 3 or 4 scores, maybe a 56-28 game. Kind of reminds me of Allen last year. Like Midland Legacy went blow for blow with Allen for like a half, and then kind of like with North Crowley and Byron Nelson, they just ran out of punches. I think that's how this game is going to go, and Trinity will take care of business. Maybe some second half adjustments.
Second half adjustment. Yeah, and then they come back to the Metroplex and take on whoever they take on, which we will talk about next week. It should be interesting. Yeah, you've already penciled them in. Use that. Richardson coaches use it. Diggs is at it again. All right, let's move on to our next one. The Duncanville Regional. Duncanville coasted against Temple. Rockwall surprisingly coasted against Saxe. And we talk about the lower half here in a second, but let's talk about the Duncanville-Rockwall game that's going to be played up at Eagle Stadium. Does Rockwall have enough momentum to hang with them for a little bit and a half? Probably not.
You remember that North Crowley game, Ward, earlier in the season?
Yeah. Is that what's
it was like 70-20 in the third quarter.
Get ready for a 70 burger?
Yeah, it's not looking good. But again, all credit to Rockwall. They proved me wrong. And, one of the things we do on this Ward is sometimes we have to give a little bit of critical analysis. And I think, unfortunately for Saxe, we kind of saw the crescendo program-wise. I think Saxe is going to take a little bit of a step back over the next couple of years. Obviously, losing Kalik Lockett, that talent is something you can't replace. But for them to be one and done this year. That's rough for them, and I think it's going to program wise going to have a little bit of a step back. They're in that district where they're not going to really struggle in that district, but I think regionally, I don't see we might get back to a situation where we only see one 9-6A team ranked going into the 2025 season. I think even Wiley now has a chance to take a step up, even though they lost and lost pretty significantly. But at least on my half, my responsibility of the bracket, we'll talk about your half of the bracket here in a second. I think Duncanville is going to be able to name their score probably when I think they'll be up by 7 touchdowns at halftime. Rockwall just doesn't have the athletes that can compete with Duncanville. Maybe at the beginning of the year, it was reminded to me that Rockwall competed very well with Lake Travis at the beginning of the year when it was kind of all the bullets were in the holster, but they lost Locke in that game, and kind of see how it falls off. But Rockwall was not competitive with Longview. Rockwall was not competitive with North Crowley. I don't think Rockwall can be competitive with Duncanville.
And it's interesting because you talk about Duncanville's counterpart, which is North Shore, who they always seem to match up for in the state final. North Shore's not getting the same cushy kind of schedule. I didn't want to call it cushy because Rockwell's a good team, but North Shore starts off in the second round right away with the Ridge Point team that's very difficult. They get by a Ridge Point, they get a Katy Tiger sitting there waiting for them. Then they have a Tascasita waiting for them, Austin Westlake waiting for them. So they're I don't know if that's a plus or a minus. If they get through all these games, they're certainly toughened up for a Duncanville. It's like a crescendo. They're going all the way up to the top team in the league here. Duncanville is, they had nothing against Temple. You're telling me it could be a 70 burger against Rockwall. I think they'll probably over-intimidate whoever comes out of this one. I would say it would be the Woodlands, but you heard what I said last week about Klein Kane's offense to be able to handle their business against Cy Ranch. That's not the case. Cy Ranch apparently is playing some solid defense there. The Woodlands has just as powerful as offense as Klein Kane does, and they're actually going to be playing this game on one of Cy Ranch's home fields here. They're playing over there at FCU, which is one of the Cypress stadiums. And they have a quarterback in Owen Cassette who has been hurt for probably the last 3 weeks, but he's back. He was back the last game. He's back this game. That's a guy that threw 8 touchdowns last year in one of the games we were at. In one of the games, he certainly can connect. And they're playing defense now. They held Klein Kane to 17 points. I still say the Woodlands is a heavy favorite here. The Woodlands is probably on a collision course here with Duncanville, but Cy Ranch has proven they can play some defense, and if that's all they need is about 5 or 6 stops, because I don't think they can go offense for offense with the Woodlands, but they can make 5 or 6 stops. Maybe we're talking all of a sudden, because they made 5 or 6 against Klein Kane. They can do that here. Maybe we're talking about them against Duncanville and serving them up to Duncanville, but we'll see about that.
I know you like trivia, Ward.
Yes.
I'm going to give you a trivia question right here. You're not expecting this. I wasn't expecting this, but you were talking, and I'm like, I'm going to see if Ward knows the answer to this. Can you name every stadium in Cypress Fair ISD? Like you said, that's one of their stadiums. Can you name all of them?
Here's the difference. They only have the 2. They got Pridgeon and they got FCU, but they play Thursday, Friday, and Saturday over there instead of
11 schools and 2 stadiums,
and they're running with the 2 stadiums. Yeah, they
worse than Garland. Garland's got 7 and 2.
Most of them play each other, obviously, and then those are the ones that they got. So they work it out. Sometimes they do double headers on Saturdays too. They'll do an 11 a.m. or 12 noon game and a game at night. So they get them all in there. So I successfully got through that trivia question. I'm so proud of myself. All right, lower half of the bracket, we call it the Bridgeland Regional. And Bridgeland had all they could handle there with Klein Oak. Klein Oak, by the way, has a freshman running back coming up through the works, Micah Rhodes, super being recruited all over the place. So kudos to him. He's going to have a long career over there at Klein Oak. But Bridgeland's taking on Conroe. Conroe got their first playoff win since, I believe, 2003 or 4. It's been a while since they got a win in the playoffs. I don't think they can handle Bridgeland, but they do have Dramecchio Green at running back. They have a defensive back named Dorian Brew, who moved in this year, who is also a D1 guy. He's actually, I think he's like the top 3 DBs in the state. So those are 2 key parts, but I don't think they can hang with Bridgeland in this one. Bridgeland's probably going to pull this one off by about 10, 15. Then we got a Saturday afternoon tilt up at Eagle Stadium. North Forney and Waxahachie. I'm not sure how many options you have for Saturday, so you may actually be at this one.
I think I'm gonna take Saturday off because I've seen both these teams. I think I know what I'm gonna get in this game. I will say, just from score watching, I was a little bit shocked at how Bridgeland played in that very first game. I wanted to see if I'm gonna name a regional after you, Ward. You
Right.
got to give me style points very early on, and I like that you think we're gonna get to the third round because we've got 16 of these slides. I haven't lost anybody yet, Ward, so I'm still good.
Right.
My regionals
Right.
are all still intact, but Bridgeland is one of the ones I'm worried about, and we'll talk about a couple of the other ones I'm a little bit worried about. But North Forney is a little bit of smoke and mirrors. I mean, they got the legend. Legend Bay is incredible, but their defense is questionable. I keep saying every time people talk about North Forney, this is a team that lost to Plano East by 2 scores. I mean,
Right.
when they play, decent schools, they just don't play well. You can even see what happened against Longview. Waxahachie just has too much talent. I think Waxahachie wins this game by 3 or 4 scores. Don't think it's going to be a very competitive game. So I think we're going to have that Waxahachie Bridgeland
Now that one should
major.
scare you. That one should scare
I'm
you.
already scared. I've got Anna PTSD as we talked about pre-show. Now we got Waxahachie coming in here. Like, we're gonna prove you wrong again, Diggs. But again, you kind of talked about it with the North Shore metaphor. But still, if Duncanville's final is against Waxahachie, who they already saw in district, whereas they got where North Shore's got Katy or Atascocita, and that's three. They're 3 and 4.
Yeah.
That is a big difference in the talent you're playing.
Absolutely. And I feel that Bridgeland plays to their competition, which is why they seem to have scores that scare us because they play either up or down to whatever they're playing. But when it comes to playing up all the way to DeSoto, I don't know if they can get that high. And you can also play with your food too much and end up getting beat here by Waxahachie or something like that. But let's move on. Let's move on to Division II. We're staying in the DFW here with Crowley. We're not staying because they're playing Midland, and then we got Denton Guyer against Richardson Pierce, which I believe is at Mustang Panther. So that's over there in Grapevine. What's your thoughts on Crowley? Because going into the playoffs, we kind of thought Crowley and Northwest might be a competitive game until Northwest kind of stumbled down the stretch, and then they just got bombed out by Crowley. Is Caleb Williams playing at a level where they can find themselves in a regional final, or at least a regional semifinal?
I think it was a perfect storm, really, because you had Justin Northwest. They had 4 straight losses, and I feel like their self-esteem and their psyche was pretty much eliminated when they started having to go to the tough part of the schedule, and they just never bounced back from that. And then you got Crowley, who's got that potential. A lot of people thought that Crowley and North Crowley was going to be 9-0 versus 9-0 game of the week, just something you really had to keep an eye on. But Crowley had a little bit of a letdown as well. I think Crowley should handle business against Midland. I think it might be, for some, a little bit of an upset, but I think Crowley is good enough to win that game. But the way they beat Justin Northwest, we talked about last week, Ward, was not a surprise just because Justin Northwest was in a tailspin coming into this game. And momentum is such an important part of the playoff run, and Northwest just had none of it. And even though Crowley got that beating against North Crowley, it's just a different speed and a different pace that they were seeing versus what Northwest was dealing with. Denton Guyer is still by and far the best team in this 4-pack. That's why they're the owners of the regional. Richardson Pierce may be able to go score for a while, but Denton Guyer is going to, pretty much take care of business. And the thing that worries me about Richardson Pierce is, you're telling me it was like 14-0 against Arlington. You blink, but then they kind of got shut down. It was like Arlington kind of figured it out. Arlington just didn't have enough firepower to overcome that early deficit. So that worries me about Richardson Pierce. I think Denton Guyer's going to run away with this.
That's right. Pierce only got the 1 score in the second half, and they got to rely on their defense, and that's going to be some problems. Some big problems. All right, let's move down to the other side, the Southlake side. Southlake's not going to let you down. You name them Southlake. You have no fear in this at all. They're not going to let you down. They certainly aren't going to let you down against Friendship. And we got Hebron and Bowie. That's actually playing at Dragon Stadium, so they could probably leave some coaches behind to take a look at that one. They wouldn't have to travel too far. Just ride their little scooter over to Dragon Stadium and take a look at Hebron, who's rolling right now. I mean, they are absolutely rolling their last 3 games. Bowie hasn't lost since non-district was over, so they're rolling on offense. Bowers had another huge game offensively, but Man, it really kind of. I want to start with that game. It really kind of feels like Hebron's got, despite their winning streak only being 3 games, I believe, it just really feels like they're on playing at a different level right now. And Bowie's playing at a great level, but who have they played? Who have they beaten? They're going to go back into playing teams that they lost to teams that lost to Hebron. So it's
Right.
going to be interesting.
That gets into the trivia question. Ward, do you remember Bowie's non-district?
I just remember some 5-6A teams that didn't work out for them. At least one of them was
Flower
Marcus,
Mound
right?
and Coppell. They played Flower Mound and Coppell and lost to both of them. They lost to
Was it
Flower
Flower
Mound
Mound
by
or was
2.
it Marcus? I thought
No,
it
it
was
was Flower
Marcus.
Mound.
Okay, all right, nice. I should
Yeah, it
know
was
my
Flower
own
Mound,
school.
and then week 1 it was 50-48, and then they lost to Coppell like 77-30. So when you look at that, Hebron should win this game pretty comfortably. It's just, a different tier. When you kind of see these 6A versus 8-6A games, you saw Richardson beat Haltom. You look at, and then you start looking at who are all of their best wins. And there's not one. They don't have any of them have a good win outside of that. Whereas Hebron, they beat Lancaster already. They were competitive, even though our joke is they were competitive for a quarter with Southlake Carroll. They were still competitive for a quarter
Right.
against Southlake Carroll. So they've seen good teams, and I think they're going to take care of Arlington Bowie. I think they win this game 3-4 touchdowns. I don't even think it's going to be much. Very competitive. I think it'll be a high scoring affair, but I'm thinking 52-28 or something like that. Maybe a late touchdown to make it that only a 24-point game. But Hebron should take care of business. So I think we're going to have the Hebron versus Southlake game. Your first quarter rematch, Ward. You were calling for it since week 3 or week 4 when you were there.
That's right. Let's see a 4 quarters of it. And Hebron's got a legitimate 1-2 trump. I mean, Patrick Creighton Jr. has really stepped up as their quarterback. It's taken a good part of a year and a half, but he's really stepped up and become the leader of that team. And they got a solid running back too, in Asen McCray Jones. He's shifty back as well, so that should be interesting. That should be a good game there. And that's a James Harris game. He'll be over there at Hebron Bowie. He likes to get that Dragon Stadium to Mustang Stadium run, Mustang Panther, so he can do one of these teams. What's going on over there? Still close? Okay, I'll stay here because it's so close. But we'll see. All right, lower half. DeSoto is playing Wiley East, a game I'll be at on Thursday. Boy, DeSoto loves to get them Thursday games out early so they can, when they start playing the big dogs, they got that extra day to prepare. DeSoto, Wiley East. Wiley East wasn't scared of them last year. I'm assuming they ain't going to be scared of them this year. It should be interesting up at McKinney ISD. And then Willis is playing Tomball, which I have as our game of the week just because I don't want to have North Shore and Ridge Point as a game of the week down in Houston because North Shore is going to probably get 2 or 3 more games of the week before this thing is over with. Willis is playing on another level, and we talked about it last week. The coach, Trent Miller, there feels like his team may be better than last year's team. We're going to find out in this game, first of all, because this is playoff Tomball, kind of just like whatever you call it, main event Jey Uso. It's just playoff Tomball, and they always play well in the playoffs. They got a Saturday game. They're flipping this thing around for Friday to play Willis. They took care of Cy Springs on a Saturday. They have an Oswaldo Morales running back that's a steady back. He's not one of those flashy guys that's going to get you 30 yards a carry, but he will get you 5. He'll get you a 5 every time he gets it and get you down the field. But Willis is just so flashy. They're going to need that from Morales because they're going to need to keep that time of possession in their favor. Otherwise, it's going to be a disaster. What do you think about the Wiley East DeSoto game? Why do I keep calling it DeSoto?
I think even though Wiley East has gotten a little bit better, and I think DeSoto has dropped a little bit, I think DeSoto felt a little bit disrespect. Coach Mathis loves to manufacture the chips on the shoulder. And Wiley East gave DeSoto one of their better games last year in that run. And I think that's going to be the motivation. Like, we need to show these Wiley East kids who we are here at DeSoto. We only beat them by 22 last year in our state championship run. Who are they? Let's go beat them. You want to run through a wall for Coach Mathis.
Get a chainsaw in here.
And then you got Wiley East, who lost to Saxey, who lost to Rockwall, and they only beat Forney by a touchdown. I think DeSoto is just gonna go 60 or 70 on them. I think we're going to see it even worse, even though I think Wiley East is better than they were last year. I think DeSoto is not as good as they were last year. I think that just talent disparity, Coach Mathis is going to have them fired up and focused in on this game, given how close last year was and how some of the people were talking about, they only beat, Wiley East by 3 touchdowns. We got to keep an eye on DeSoto. They're not that good this year in that playoff run. I think that's going to be highly motivating for them. But you got to manufacture these storylines, Ward.
Right, exactly. We're hearing a lot of that too. You listen to different people. You're hearing a lot of, well, DeSoto's not as good as they were a year before. Well, I'm not going to buy into that. Maybe they're not showing it on the field right now, but you're not going to trick me into saying DeSoto may only will struggle with Wiley East, because I don't think they will. I think they're going to beat Willis, even though I'm the Houston guy when they play Willis. So it's interesting. It'll be an interesting matchup again, especially it really will be interesting is where they're going to end up playing it. I know Claude loves the Alamo Dome, but Trent Miller's not a big fan of going down there, so we'll see how that flip goes this time and how they'll iron those details out. All right, the other side, we got Naaman Forest losing to Longview, but not by the score we expected. It was kind of a struggle there. Actually, do you owe Coach Perales another apology? I don't know. You're being apologizing to a lot of coaches these days. Longview against Lancaster, which it could very well, I haven't decided at this moment, it could be our game of the week in DFW, because that one looks like a solid matchup. And if it's Longview, they're either playing at Mesquite Memorial or Kincaid, and that's where they're going. Kincaid, there's 2 stadiums that like to play it, and that's where they're going. On the lower half, College Park took care of Spring Westfield. See, these are 3 and 4 seeds that are moving on down in the lower part of the bracket. College Park was a 4 seed out of their district. Klein Collins had to wait till the very last day to get in. They got in and beat Cy Woods. Cypress team's going out like suckers. They're going out like suckers this year, except for Bridgeland and the Branch. But Klein Collins is taking on College Park. It looks like a Klein Collins type win. It's kind of one of those deals. Maybe they're playing the Tom Ball role this year. Barely make it in and make a little run here. They're looking like they are. Spring Westfield has been given. I kind of called this upset last week. They gave me the vibes of a team in a rebuilding mode here. They never quite could get their quarterback up to snuff. Miles Dent, he was the only guy doing anything, and he couldn't find any receivers, so he was running all the time. And the way College Park throws it around, I had a feeling that they might pull this one off. They did, and now they're taking on Klein Collins. And this could be like a 60-40 game in Klein Collins' favor. But this is the way Division 2 is going in Houston. Any team that you thought was going to win is not winning, except for Summer Creek. And we all saw up here in DFW what happened when Summer Creek came up here. It was not a sight to see at all. People were left early and beat the traffic. But that's the only team that's ranked that's actually doing anything down there in Division 2. So tell me about this Lancaster-Longview game, because I believe that's going to be game of the week up here.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that Coach King was willing to play at Kincaid, because if you remember the last time they played at Kincaid, they were a favorite over a black and orange team, and then all of a sudden, they lost against that black and orange team. And then last year they played Lancaster, and they lost to Lancaster last year. So I would think that they would kind of want to maybe have a little bit of a change of scenery and take that away from the traditional places that they've seen. The way Longview played against Naaman Forest, I talked about Bridgeland as one of my worries about the name of the regional. This Longview is right now on watch, because I'm going to take Lancaster in this game. I think Lancaster just has too much talent, and Longview, now that they're out of that 11, now that they're out of 10-6A and starting to play some other teams, it's not looking great again. It's like 10-6A has these really high-powered offenses that Longview really matches up well against and then kind of flex against. That ain't going to be the case against Lancaster. Lancaster has a very talented defense. They've got they can do it both ways. They can have Isaiah Lee and just run the ball, or they can put Carter Jones and throw it out to Emmanuel Choice. I mean, they have D1 players at every skill position. So whatever Longview gives them, Lancaster can take. So I think Lancaster is going to pull an upset and take the regional away from Longview. We're still going to call it the Longview regional, because I'm not going to change a graphic on this. But I think our first regional is going to fall this week, Ward.
That's interesting. That is a good point, because there was another time they came here in the playoffs at Mesquite Memorial and they played Denton Ryan. They didn't win there either. So why are they choosing to come down here? Why aren't they choosing to find a neutral site? I know they travel well, but it doesn't mean they end up winning these things. All right, you ready to move on to 5A Division One? Let's do it. We got some games here that I feel are in our favor. Richland against Amarillo. We got Denton Ryan playing Saturday against Lubbock Monterey out in Abilene. These look like we're gearing up for another Ryan Richland game in the next round right after Thanksgiving. Maybe they'll even play on Thanksgiving and just mess up my whole Thanksgiving dinner. I'll just break out to see Richland and Ryan. That's not going to be the case, but maybe. You never know. Talk to me about these two games. Is either one of these West Texas teams given any comp?
Make you feel a little bit better. Since they're playing on Saturday, they're probably not going to do a 5-day turnaround.
No,
so you'll
that's
probably be
probably
pretty
right.
safe about that.
Good point.
But
Good
yeah,
point.
I think of all of the games that we're going to be watching, the West Texas versus DFW teams, it's Tascosa. And, I've got history of Tascosa. I always tell my Tascosa story. When we get there, I'll probably tell it one more time for those who have forgotten my Tascosa story. But I'm not loved at Tascosa High School by any means, or the sports writers out in Amarillo. But the one game that worries me that, other than the fact that Tascosa, I think, is a favorite over Saginaw, is going to be that I think Lubbock Monterey is good enough to where if Denton Ryan doesn't play at their best, or if Denton Ryan is just kind of going through the motions, they're good enough to capitalize on some things. But I think Denton Ryan is still a 3-touchdown favorite. But if Monterey on a random Saturday you get some wind or something, it's just a little bit wonky, I think they're good enough to be competitive with Denton Ryan, which kind of turns it into maybe a one-score kind of a game if the crazy stuff happens. But I think both Richland and Denton Ryan should win these games comfortably by 3 or 4 scores and get ready for that rematch. But again, we talk about styles make fights, Ward, and I think Richland would rather, as weird as it sounds, Richland would rather play Aledo than Denton Ryan, because you saw how that style and that matches up. They don't match up well against Denton Ryan at all. So I don't think Richland enjoys the fact that they have to play Denton Ryan. I think they would probably rather ask for the 12-time state champion. But I think both these teams are in their collision course for that third round game.
That's a good point. That probably shocks a lot of people too to hear you say that, but you're exactly right. All you got to do is look back at the previous matchups. All right, going down to the next region where we have we call it the Aledo region. Aledo. Why are we calling it the Aledo region? Because that's the orange and black team he referenced to a couple regions ago, a couple brackets ago. They're taking on Abilene. They're going to play that game up at Newsom. So they're bringing them into town here and a little bit past Aledo just to get over to Mansfield and make it somewhat neutral. Not really. And then Saginaw, who got that big win over Azle, as we were expecting, give them a little Rough Rider love there for getting their first playoff win in a while. They're playing your boys from Tascosa.
Yeah, and kind of just to revisit things, Tascosa went on a run and made it to like the fifth round of the playoffs about 5 or 6 years ago, and I picked them to lose every single week against the DFW teams because I espouse DFW superiority. That's what I do. I'm the DFW insider here at Inside High School Sports, and apparently one of their sports writers over there really was annoyed by the arrogance that I had in the way I picked DFW teams over West Texas teams just because they came from DFW. And he did this whole article on me, and a whole sarcastic article about why DFW is superior and we should just call off the season and let the DFW schools play each other, which I wouldn't hate in any sort of world. But now we call it Tascosa season because Tascosa loves to play DFW area schools just to dig at me, just to be like, we're going to beat one. And I think they are going to win this game. I think this is a very even matchup, but I think the way Tascosa plays, I think that they're going to bully Saginaw on the lines, and I think that they're going to have a bit of a maybe a runaway victory. I'm cheering for Saginaw personally as a DFW area. I'd like to see Saginaw make it, and again, I got some business from some people in Saginaw this week because I said they may be one of the most porous 11-0 teams we've had, but I'm trying to speak regionally. That's what I got to do, because you got people from Amarillo who are reading the dump now. They're tuning in. They're like, okay, it's time to flip over to Inside High School Sports now that we are in Tascosa season. Let's see what we got from DFW. And I think it's important to know that regionally, Saginaw is not an 11-0 team like Aledo. Even none of those teams are undefeated, by the way. But you're looking over here and you're thinking, if you're just a casual observer of football,
Right.
there's only one team in this district that's 11-0, or this region that's 11-0. That's Saginaw. You got to put an asterisk by it, Ward. That's all I'm saying, is you got to put an
Right.
asterisk by that 11-0. It doesn't change the story. It doesn't change that it's a great story. It doesn't change that they were 1-9 last year and they've turned around. It doesn't change what a great job Coach Peters has done, and the fact that they were down 2 scores in that game and scored 2 touchdowns in the last 3 minutes. It doesn't change any of that. I'm just saying, regionally, Saginaw is not a powerhouse. And I think people need to understand that if you're a casual observer. If you're a follower of this podcast, you follow things, you know that. But people from Amarillo is just going to look at that record and go, uh-oh. But it's not the case.
Right. And then they get themselves some false hope there as they go into a Aledo game. And we already took out one 11-0 team. Aledo's not going to be that difficult because we're just going to take it to them. It's going to be a different story, brother. Your thoughts on Abilene trying their best against Aledo?
Abilene, this is like the third or fourth time I think Abilene has made it a bit where they fight like their way to Newsom, just like Amarillo or just like Longview has found their way into a couple of stadiums. I think Abilene has made their way out here a couple of times, and they kind of like Newsom Stadium. Aledo's a big favorite in this game, but I think it will be a close competitive game for a half. I think Abilene will slow it down, and Abilene has enough athletes. I don't think we're going to see 35-0 at halftime or anything. I think it's going to be kind of like the North Crowley and Byron Nelson game, maybe a little bit more of a margin, maybe 21-7, 21-14 at halftime. Then the Aledo will take care of business in the second half. Abilene just is good enough to be competitive with Aledo. Just give them a little bit of a tussle, but I don't think there's any risk of them losing this game.
No, I agree with that. All right, moving down to the Lone Star Regional. Lone Star did what they had to do against WT White. They had an extra day now to prepare for Red Oak, who has agreed to play with them at the Star. That's where that game will be taking place. And a game I feel that's going to be pretty close is West Mesquite, Midlothian. I actually, it's interesting in going that one, but you know what? We're pulling Neil Beasley out to shoot that one, and it's not a country roads game. He's going into it as just a regular photographer that enjoys high school football, and especially a game that's within 5 minutes of his house. He's heading to Wildcat Ram to see this one. Let's start with that game because that game seems super close. Again, West Mesquite's 11-0, but we can't let the 11-0 fool you. But in this case, they actually are a very quality team that can compete with a lot of the teams in this region. And I think Midlothian's one of the teams.
Yeah, this is one of the games that I really had to do some research on and try to dig in to find a little bit of an edge on it, because I just feel like this is a true coin flip game. Either team wins, even the team I'm not going to pick, they win. I'm not going to be surprised at all. What I will be surprised about is if it turns into like Rockwall and Saxe, where one of these teams wins by 35 points or something. But I'm going to go with Midlothian in this game just because really digging into the way West Mesquite played against McKinney North, I feel like Midlothian is going to be able to have a little bit more success in the running game because of the style of it. And West Mesquite hasn't seen that this year. And I think that, they've seen a more traditional lineup and run sort of thing, but they haven't seen the triple option this year. I know Coach Jackson is going to be ready for it. He's going to coach them up, and I think they're going to be prepared for this. But Midlothian has figured it out, and their offense, even though they don't have all of the skill players that they've had in previous years, the system is running as good as it ever has. And I think that system is going to be good enough to beat West Mesquite. That's just the Midlothian system. They kind of like Gunner's system and Salina's system at times. The Midlothian system is firing at all levels, and they beat Lake Belton, a very good Lake Belton team. And again, Midlothian, when West Mesquite looks across at Midlothian, that's the best team they've seen this year. But it's not the best team that Midlothian's seen this year. And I think that that is a big factor. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I think it's going to be, maybe a 35-28 sort of a game. I think Midlothian should have the edge in this one.
And then going to the top half, Red Oak and Lone Star, obviously Davian Gross is back in the offense there. I wonder if he's going to after what we saw with Karish White when he was down, and Karish White, excuse me, proven to be that much of a dynamic running quarterback where he can take care of the running duties if you need him to. Are we going to finally see Gross primarily in the position where I believe he wanted to be at the beginning of the year, right? More of a swing guy out of the backfield, somebody to throw the ball to, so he can get recruited as a receiver as well. That looks like a dangerous combination now, especially since Hoyt proved that he can do it against one of the area's best when he took apart Reedy in the second half there. And then you have a Red Oak team, obviously the receivers down. Taz Williams Jr. has been down almost the whole year, but Braden Robinson's still there. Talk to me about how you think this game will play out.
Well, first of all, I want to give a shout out to Davian. We actually talked about this 2 weeks ago, almost flippantly at times, because I said I heard that he may be out for the year, but a lot of coaches don't want to. We don't get the injury reports. They don't fax us this before we do our podcast, and sure enough, he's in there playing. I hear he's fighting through it, and there are several players at this level. The Aledo quarterback I'm hearing is fighting through a pretty significant injury. This guy Davian, I think, is fighting through a significant injury. And that really speaks to the heart and the love of Texas high school football in the playoffs, that you are like, if you have an injury that's not going to get worse and going to cost you money and cost you, recruitability, you play through it, you do it for your team, and these kids are doing it. I tip my hat. That's very brave and very encouraging, and I know that's got to be motivating for the team. Red Oak just doesn't have the defense that can play with Lone Star. I think So the question is Red Oak's offense good enough to go score for score with Lone Oak? I just don't think so. I think you're going to see a 59-35 kind of a game. I think Lone Star will take care of business comfortably, but Red Oak will get theirs.
I got you. Yeah, the perfect example we got playing through injuries was Quinn Ewers back when he was a quarterback at Southlake. Man, his insides were all kinds of torn up. He had some bleeding going on in there, and that would have affected his recruiting ability had he not left early. But he stuck it out, got him to that state title game. It didn't work out for him, but that's, like you said, you got to give kudos to people that are willing to do that just for the love of the sport, which in a lot of cases is a lot more meaningful to them than the actual college game when they go to college and play, because the community, you're playing for your community instead of a community that you've kind of moved into. So kudos to Gross, and we'll see how that game turns out. Going to the back half, we got at the lower end, we got Frisco Reedy against Georgetown. Georgetown kind of struggled against Centennial. I didn't expect that. I expected that running back to go crazy there. And now they're taking on Reedy down in Corsicana. Highland Park's taking on Wakeland. This is, what we talked about last week, this is rematch 3 years in the making. They jumped up to 6A after getting up, having their 5A run stymied by Wakeland 29-28 back in 3 years ago. They've been sitting on it, and they say, if we ever get back down to 5A, I'm going to get those guys. And they get their chance over in your neck of the woods. This might be one for you to go to. You can probably walk to it as they're playing up at Kimball.
I could walk there, but you want me to go to Longview and Lancaster.
That's
so
true.
I got to figure out what I want to do. The good news is I already got my press pass at DISD. We're good for that. So I get to kind of put that in the back pocket and decide on this. But Ward, if you actually listen to this podcast, I know you kind of go to sleep and you start looking at your fantasy, your phone or whatever. I told you Georgetown was not that good. I told you they lost to a sixth place team in their district. And I told you that they would probably win a very close game against Burleson Centennial. But I think that would highlight to you that regionally, when it comes to these DFW teams, they're not that strong. Frisco Reedy matches up very well against them. And I know for some people, they're going to call it an upset. I don't think it's an upset. I think Reedy's going to win this game comfortably.
Yeah, I wouldn't call that an upset. And maybe I should have said just me was thinking the win over Burleson Centennial was not by enough style points. I didn't mean to throw you in with me, but we're a team. I try anytime I think of something, you're supposed to be thinking it too. But that's certainly not the case in this point. But yeah,
you not want to do our fantasy football things. I don't think anything like you, Ward.
No, you don't, and that's why you went 7-4. Why do you have to bring that up? Gosh, do I need to go to the text and bring it up? All right, tell me what you think about Wakeland and Highland Park. What has to go right for Wakeland to repeat their performance from 3 years ago?
Everything has to go right for them. I actually had people you got to listen to the podcast, folks. You got to understand how these regionals work. I had a Highland Park fan feel very disrespected because he was watching the dump and going through it, and he saw the Frisco Lone Star regional. He's like, "Why are you disrespecting us, Diggs? Why are you calling it the Frisco Lone? Why do you not like Highland Park?" And I was like, all of a sudden, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. It was two parts. You got to know what you're talking about,
They're on the
Warren, before you
defensive.
come at Diggs.
They're on the
You got to know what
defensive
you're
early.
talking about.
Sometimes they're on the defensive early. It's got to wait it out. I don't have that kind of patience either. Sometimes I get all squirrely and want to jump at somebody. But you're right. Everything has got it right. Your boy Maples has been playing great, but if you analyze the stats, he does have 9 picks on the year. He cannot have 10, 11, or 12. He can't get those numbers up here. That thing's over quickly. And I think he's found his favorite targets, Ryder, Treadway, and Meyer, consistently enough to keep it out of the other team's hands. But man, Highland Park's line with Jack Morris and them, they're going to get through that offensive line, and that's going to be problems. He's going to have to make split-second decisions there, and correct ones at that.
Yeah, Highland Park has, and I saw this going back to the very first game against Plano East when they had their scrimmage against Plano East. I was watching their defense, and I was like, how bad are we this year? We couldn't do anything against this Highland Park defense. They looked like they were in week 6 or week 7 defensive mode already in preseason scrimmage game. That's to me the difference in this game, and that's why I think Highland Park has a chance in every game that they play because they're so well coached and they have the athletes who can play with just about anybody in 5A. Remember that Lovejoy game? They kept Lovejoy to almost next to nothing as well. I think Highland Park can limit almost any offense in the state of Texas. Wakeland has to play a perfect game. If they're going to win, it's going to look exactly like it did when they beat them. It's got to be a 29-28 where everything goes right. I just don't think that they're going to be able to play that perfect with that level of defensive pressure that's going to be getting up in the Maples. I think Highland Park is going to win a dogfight, but I think they'll win a 2-score game.
Maybe they need a dogfight to get through the rest of these playoffs because they didn't get too many dogfights during the regular season. So we'll see how that goes. Let's move on to Division II, Region 1. And we're talking Lovejoy and Anna taking on some West Texas teams. Yeah, you had a little altercation again, not altercation, just interaction with our boy Alonzo out of Anna. Boy, he doesn't. They're using you all over the place up there in Anna, huh?
Yeah. Tip your hat to Anna. I mean, you can justify that game was 17-10 going to the fourth quarter, and then they had 4 or 5 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. But you know what? War, this is a 48-minute game, and they did end up winning by 5 touchdowns, and they won very comfortably. Colleyville Heritage. You get to that point in the playoffs where you start going for it on 4th and 10 from your own 20, and you get some scores that kind of go quickly the other way because. What does it matter? If you lose by 1 or lose by 30, you're done. So Colleyville Heritage kind of had that happen. But I feel like we're going to a collision course with Anna and Lovejoy again, and I feel like Anna is looking at that like, hey, we can beat Lovejoy, and I think that game is a pure coin flip. But Lovejoy against Timberview showed me some defensive intensity because Timberview's defense was pretty much that element of what made Timberview great all year, and Lovejoy carved it up. So I think both teams are playing on both sides of the ball much better. I think both of these games are going to be 4 or 5 score games. I think they're going to blow them out. And then Lovejoy Anna. Where would you play Lovejoy Anna at?
We're going back to Eagle Stadium. Bring it down triangular style. Actually, that's maybe
Find
too
out,
close.
but I mean,
might be
maybe
too close
McKinney?
to Lovejoy.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe Melissa.
That may be a better spot than McKinney. You're right. Lovejoy, I keep forgetting, is sometimes considered double A to Allen's right next door to it. So, oh God, don't let that get out. I'm not marking that one. If they hear that, it's a wrap. It's funny how I know you told me some Anna fans are saying, wait till we get Lovejoy again. It's going to be a different situation. But I have a feeling Lovejoy fans are saying the same thing. I don't think either one of their fan bases think it's going to be a score up in the 60s like we had when I was there in week whatever it was, 4, I believe. So I think it's going to be a completely different game. But I think it's going to be just as close if we get to it. But Lovejoy's playing. You saw them live, like you said. They're playing at a different level too. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it's crazy how both teams have gotten better and developed, kind of like you would think they would. A 4A state champion and a Todd Dodge team are getting better, and I think it's going to be important because at the same time, when you flip over to the next slide, I think we're on a collision course for Argyle and Walnut Grove as well. And remember, very first week of the year, Lubbock Cooper beat Lovejoy,
Yeah.
so they're certainly good enough to be competitive with Walnut Grove. And Walnut Grove just plays a style of football where it seems like they're close on just about every game, except for Anna, which beat them by 2 or 3 scores. And, Anna kind of got out on them and then they couldn't go blow for blow. So I think Walnut Grove probably wins another one of these kind of games like they played with Seguin, where it's 42-35, 42-28, where you just kind of scratch your head like, you just want them to put them away. Argyle should win comfortably over the new Wichita Falls school, which is kind of their better school after they did their consolidation. And I think we're setting up Argyle, Walnut Grove, and Anna and Lovejoy. So it's going to be fun.
Yeah, it was interesting because when I went to the Walnut Grove militia game, I'd cut so many highlights of Cam Newton. I was so looking forward to it, and he may have gotten 10 carries. Then you go to this game against Seguin, he's got it 49 times for 392 yards. I was like, man, he's putting out Nick Ralston numbers. So Argyle knows exactly about hammering a hot running back because they ran Nick Ralston into the ground that state final game at one time. I think he had 50 carries that game. It was crazy. But anyway, that's going to be good. That's going to be good stuff. All right, let's move down to South Oak Cliff against Huntsville. We got Midlothian Heritage and Marshall. Man, that South Oak Cliff Huntsville game, I've heard a bunch of people talking about heading down to Waco ISD for that one. Again, we've said this 2 or 3 times. It depends on which Huntsville team we got. If they're playing at their peak, they're going to give South Oak Cliff all they can handle. If not, South Oak Cliff gets themselves a 15, 20-point win.
The one thing I just kind of look at is the way, and again, you kind of follow this district as part of the Houston area with PNG and Huntsville and the Montgomery schools. All I really do is look at the way they play District 7. And Nederland, which is what many people thought was the best team in that district because they beat PNG, just got absolutely throttled by Texas High. And then I thought the other 3 schools would take care of business, and Marshall beat Montgomery. So just looking at that, I feel like District 8 is not as strong as we thought they were going into things. It may be that, maybe there's a playoff switch that's going to turn on. But the way South Oak Cliff is playing, I think they're going to win comfortably over Huntsville, at least the way it's calibrated. Now, Huntsville at their best, are they good enough to put a scare into South Oak Cliff? If South Oak Cliff is playing a little bit down, absolutely. But again, just looking at the calibration early, I think South Oak Cliff is a pretty big favorite. I like Midlothian Heritage to take care of Marshall. And then we'll have our round 3, our annual tradition of Sauk against Midlothian Heritage, which seems to almost always go to overtime or have a crazy ending attached to it. So go ahead and just write that down, Ward, and find out who's going to get to film it.
I'm not writing it down yet. And the reason I'm not writing it down is because I went into the season thinking that A5A was PNG and Huntsville. One tier down was Lake Creek, and Neederville and Montgomery weren't even on my radar at all. Obviously, Lake Creek proved they couldn't play defense at all and got blown out in games that they needed to win. Nederland, I think that was an anomaly the whole time. I don't know who you were talking to that said they thought for sure that was the best team in there, because I didn't, despite them being up there 8-0. Once they started playing the PNG, the Huntsvilles, and I believe they finished off with Lake Creek, they ended up getting beat. They did beat PNG, so I got to give them credit for that. I'm still hanging my hat on Huntsville. I don't think they win this game, but I'm not sitting here saying let's pencil in Sauk and Midlothian Heritage. I'll pencil it in at 4:30 on Saturday if the game doesn't start going the way I think it will go, and I think the thing will be close. That's all I'm going to stick with there. All right, the other side. Now, I don't think these 2 games are going to be close at all. I think Crandall's in for a hurting, and I think the same can be said for Kaufman when they play PNG. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we call it the Texas High Regional for a reason, and all of a sudden, how much are you going to hate life next week, Ward, when we're talking about Texas High versus PNG on the Digging for Wisdom DFW podcast?
I got control of the I can control the graphics here. We may jump over that PowerPoint. You'd be like, "What happened?" I said, "There's a glitch, some sort of glitch." But let's talk 4A action. Is that what we're going to end up doing? I mean, how badly are these games going to get?
Yeah, I think
we saw what happened.
Crandall's got that really good running back, and I think if he can get going, maybe they can compress the game. But Texas High, I just think has too much firepower. Kaufman, I mean, it they're just at a different level. I mean, we're talking about a defending state champion against a 4A Division One team that moved up to 5A Division Two and found their way into the playoffs. They were kind of my dark horse, but I think now they're running into PNG. That's just a tough road for them. So I do think both these teams are Texas High and PNG are going to be significantly favorited to win their games. And then I bet PNG may be watching our podcast feeling disrespected that we did not name it the PNG Regional.
Yeah, we'll hear from.
That's why you got to watch all the podcasts, Ward, because you never know when you're going to be talked about.
Exactly.
You never know when you're going to turn into the voice of Humble Kingwood's.
Yes, exactly.
You just never know.
And Kingwood, speaking of Kingwood, they're going to go ahead and go 4 rounds here, too, the way their brackets filled out. And here I am, the voice that motivated. Man, I feel like I should get some sort of Kingwood jersey or something. All right, let's move to 4A. 4A Division 1. Let's talk about these brackets here. What we have is, for teams that are involved with us, it's just, to me, it's just Stephenville down there. You're going to talk about all of them, but Stephenville's got Hereford. And, man, I just feel like we're playing these games, and it's good to have playoff experience, but we're playing these games to get to a Stephenville-Salina regional final. Your thoughts on some of these other ones that are out-of-area teams and should have no business being on our bracket?
I agree. I mean, I agree with you. Stephenville is 4 or 5 touchdowns better than just about everybody in this bracket. So it's just going through it. You got Dumas versus Lampasas. Lampasas was part of that district with Stephenville, so I think that they'll be a favorite. I think Brownwood will be a favorite. I like Canyon Randall over Andrews, and I think Stephenville will take care of business. I am not 100% sure we're going to see Stephenville Salina. I think Salina has a little bit of a tougher road. Stephenville. Yeah, I mean, it's highly likely, but I'm just saying they have a tougher road than Stephenville. Stephenville, you can pretty much go ahead and pencil in. Salina's got to at least earn.
Yeah, I moved on to that one as you were talking because my favorite game of the week is going to be Panther Creek and Alvarado, which is going to be on Thursday night at the Star. I'm excited about that one. Neil Busey's going to be at that one. Sulphur Springs, Springtown has my juices flowing a little bit. Aubrey with a completely well-coached victory over Kimball is going to be taking on Decatur. And then Kennedale and Salina. I just think Salina's the better team in that Kennedale. Out of all 4 of those matchups coming up, I think Salina's probably a huge favorite in that game. Your thoughts on some of these other ones? I really want to hear your thoughts on Panther Creek Alvarado.
I mean, the problem with Panther Creek is, you kind of talked about it with Bridgeland, is they seem to play down to everybody who they played. And you get all these crazy one-score games, but they, find a way to win those games. But then they played a really good team against Salina, and they were not competitive at all. So it makes me a little bit nervous. But Alvarado kind of reminds me of Saginaw in that they're 11-0, but tell me their best win. They don't have a really good win on their resume where you can say, okay, I think that is the case. Panther Creek at the Star, I think they're going to win this game, and I think that home familiarity, they'll take care of business. Springtown Sulphur Springs to me has a lot of interest in it. I thought about maybe headed out to that one as well, but I think you talked me into going to Alvarado and Panther Creek. Sulphur Springs again at their best. The way they beat Carter was just a significant beatdown. But I think Springtown, I'm going to give them a little bit of an edge in that game. Salina big over Kennedale. Aubrey Decatur is really a coin flip because Aubrey has played a lot more competition than Decatur has. That one I may change my mind on when you see my picks on Thursday. For the podcast, I'll probably say Decatur, but I'll probably have to do a little bit more research to see if I can find a way for Aubrey to win that game. But the fact that Aubrey beat Kimball, but the fact that Aubrey didn't dominate Kimball and had to kind of have a little bit of fourth quarter heroics makes me think that Decatur should be able to win that game.
Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting. Again, Alvarado's got a quarterback, Carday Collier. That's a nice dual threat. He'll be going up against Jalen Lott over there on the other side, who's already got 80 catches. That's crazy for me in high school. When I was growing up in high school, you wouldn't even dream about getting 40 catches because all you used to do was run the ball. But now he's got 80 through 11. That's going to be special. Auburn made the plays they had to against Kimball there to win that game. I kind of figured they would. and they did, and that's kudos to them. 4A Division II, Region 1. Let's talk through some of these games because we talked about steering towards a Graham-Brock rematch where Brock hopes to not get goose-egged and give them a little bit better of a game. But and these second-round matchups like the Glen Rose Seminole game, Graham Monahan's, Brock against Estacado and Benbrook and Greenwood. Talk a little bit about Benbrook. I want to hear you talk about Benbrook because we haven't really addressed them that much on this podcast, but they're here in the second round. Talk to them about them and their chances against Greenwood, and then maybe their chances against the Brock team.
Benbrook has played really good football this year, and their record is a little bit misleading. But it's one of those kind of like Saginaw. You can only play who you're scheduled with, and even the fact that they haven't had to play a lot of high-powered teams, I think the fact that Glen Rose is clearly the really good team out of their district, and they weren't competitive against Glen Rose. But the fact that they got to Godley and Dunbar, and all of a sudden they're playing those games a little bit better. I like that. I mean, you see a little bit of improvement there. But Midland Greenwood is a little bit better than those teams, and I think the fact that that Benbrook could not blow out those kind of games, I think Midland Greenwood's probably going to be a favorite in that game. Brock should have no problem with Estacado. Graham should have no problem with Monahan's. Glen Rose is the team that I'm really they're looking like they're getting better. And remember, Ward, it seems like they're a team that gets better, kind of like you were talking about with Tom Ball.
Yeah.
Glen Rose in the playoffs is a team you don't want to see, and Glen Rose is getting hot at the right time. So Glen Rose versus Graham in week 3 could be a really telling game. I feel like Glen Rose has a better chance to beat Graham right now than Brock does.
Excellent. Yeah, they are playing a lot better, and they do seem to go deep as well. All right, let's move to 4A Division II, Region 2. Van Alstyne, Gilmore, Pleasant Grove. We got Farmersville. We got Crum and Carthage, which is the game you were thinking about going to at one point. And then you said no, you don't want to go up to Melissa. Farmersville and Pleasant Grove is what I meant. Sunnyvale's playing Gilmore. Gilmore's our defending state champion. How is Sunnyvale going to do against that squad?
The best game of these 4 games, because you look at Gilmer and Center, and Gilmer struggled against Center. This was a third-place team in their district, and Gilmer only won that game by 2 scores. And Sunnyvale, I watched them, and they really reminded me of Gunter, just like they were looking for a fight. Like they were right on that edge of getting a personal foul every single play because they were up in people's faces, and they were playing at a high level. Gilmer at their best is better than Sunnyvale at their best. But if Gilmer plays against Sunnyvale the way they did against Center, Sunnyvale's going to win that game. So that's why I'm very interested in that, because Sunnyvale's got talent. They've got good defense. They've got that Maupin, who is really good at throwing the ball, and he's really even better when he gets out in space and is able to scramble a little bit. They've got 2 or 3 really talented running backs that play both sides of the ball. I don't think I have the courage to pick Sunnyvale to beat Gilmer, but I think that's a really, really good game and really competitive. I think Pleasant Grove will have their way with Farmersville. Carthage will have their way with Crum. And I think Van will have their way with Van Alstyne, because these East Texas schools are really good. But I remember, Ward, last year thinking coming into it, here go all the DFW schools. They're going to, Aubrey was part of this bracket. And I was like, none of them are going to be competitive. But all of them were competitive against the East Texas schools. So that shows me that they made a little bit of progress. So I think that we're going to see that again. But Ric Flair theory, Ward, to be the man, you got to beat the man.
Yep.
How can you pick against Gilmer? You can't do it. Even if in your heart you think Sunnyvale can do it. I can't type it out. Sunnyvale by 1. Just can't do it.
And that's the way everybody.
Maybe I can. Maybe I'll watch some more footage this week and change my mind. But it's hard to pick it, because how many times, like Ward, how many times have I picked against Highland Park over the last 7 years or whatever, and then I have to come apologize? It just seems like every year you pick against one of those teams, and then you're just here apologizing afterwards. So I got to get better at that. Same thing with Aledo. Like, you pick against Aledo, it's fine. Then they win. And you're like, right. It's Aledo. It's Gilmer. It's Carthage.
I should have known better, right? That's the way everybody feels across the state, by the way. Anytime there's a 4A or lower East Texas team, everybody, even the teams in Houston, San Antonio, if they ever end up playing them, which they usually never do, but definitely in the Houston region, they're like, all right, we're going to chalk this. It's going to be a dogfight. I mean, they got Tyler Chapel Hill heading down to Houston this week. I'm sure they're going to take care of their HISD opponent. They just play that small classification East Texas team. You just don't want to see them on your bracket. You don't want to see them at all. You hope they get upset early, and it doesn't happen. You know you're in for a scrap. All right, let's go to our next region, 3A, Division 1, Region 1. We got Peaster's playing. Peaster's still out there playing against Shallow Water. We got River Road. I never even heard of River Road. Have you? Where are they from?
We're from Amarillo, right down the river.
Interesting. River Road against Vernon. I passed through Vernon. Jim Ned. We used to have a freelance guy out in that way. His name was Jim Fry, and he would always shoot our Jim Ned high school football games whenever they play. We always called him Jim Fry, the Jim Ned guy, because he'd always come through for us. But anyway, Jim Ned's playing Dalhart and Paradise against Bushland down there at the bottom end of the bracket. Who do we have coming through in these brackets here? Obviously, I know nothing about River Road, and it seems like it's named after a street. Talk to me about that team. Do they have any kind of chance against Vernon?
It's funny because, I don't know if you remember this summer, I kind of did a tour of Texas up in the Panhandle. I went on a little bit of a road trip. We went up to Colorado Springs,
Yeah.
and I went through Dumas and Dalhart and some of these smaller schools, and went and took some pictures. And I was like, I just want to see what the communities are like. And on our way back, I actually drove by River Road High School. It's like in North Amarillo, and I'm like, that's River Road High School. I remember them. They didn't win a district game this year, but then they beat the district champions in District 2. So I guess that lets you know that District 1 was a little bit better than District 2, or that when they started playing each other. Shallow Water. This kind of takes me back to my District 4 3A report days, Ward, back when I was having to break this down. Back then, Brock was in this region, and it's like, okay, who's Brock going to have to play? And, always worried about Brock and Bushland. That was kind of the team you had to look at. And now we got Paradise and Bushland, so that's going to be a fun game. But Shallow Water and Bushland are the two West Texas teams you got to keep an eye on because they're really good. So Shallow Water should take care of Peaster. Peaster had a nice win against Comanche in overtime, so congratulations to Peaster. They got their first ever playoff win. Parker County representing, but I think Vernon's going to take care of Amarillo River Road. I think Jim Ned takes care of Dalhart, and I think Bushland Paradise is the one game to keep an eye on, but Bushland is just really, really good, and Paradise doesn't have Austin Iglesias anymore, so I think Bushland's going to take care of business.
All righty, what about Region 2 here? Who you got as a favorite in this thing? Our boys from Mayperil still out there playing a team that's not from North Texas, Malakoff, with the East Texas-bound Malakoff squad still going on. Pilot Point still playing for us. Grandview still playing for us. Which of our DFW teams that I mentioned, don't add any other DFW teams in there, which of those three DFW teams has the best chance of going through?
Ward,
don't
you don't watch our rankings every week. Our rankings all year was Malakoff #1 in our North Texas rankings.
I don't go to 3A because you pull off all sorts of craziness when you get into 3A.
Winsboro #2. So I think we're just
one of these
going through the motions to get back to Whitesboro, get to Malakoff versus Winsboro. Although Liberty Ilo is the one team that could get in there and mess things up a little bit. Liberty Ilo is a pretty solid school. I think that's a 50-50 game with Winsboro and Liberty Ilo, but I'm still going to give the edge to the DFW zone Winsboro. Grandview Jefferson is a really good game. Jefferson should be a favorite. I think they're like state ranked. But the way they played Mineola, that was a 50-50 game for a while. Our guy, Derek Ray Johnson, who is a former DFW adjacent guy, and now he lives out in East Texas, he was covering that game, and he was like, upset alert, upset alert. It was like 27-27 at halftime. And then Jefferson took care of business in the second half. I think Jefferson should beat Grandview. I think Malakoff is going to beat Maypearl handily. I think Winsboro is going to take care of Palmer. And Pilot Point, let's give them a shout out. That's a great story to beat Mejia, the district champion. This is a team that was just left for dead. Then Chad Worrell has come in and has kind of revitalized them. They get a playoff win. That's going to be big for the community, but they're not going to have any chance against Liberty Ilo. Liberty Ilo is going to win big. So we got Liberty Ilo, you got Winsboro, you got Malakoff, and you got Jefferson as my picks to click in 3A Division 1 Region 2.
Picks to click. All right. What about Division II? How's our boys from Gunter doing there? We're still on course for another title for the Tigers.
This is going to be a big game for Gunter because City View played Holiday. They didn't play very competitively, but City View and Jacksboro were very close to each other, and Holiday was kind of a level above them. So how does Gunter play City View? Because City View is a good team. They've had a couple of big upsets this year. So does Gunter blow out City View, or is this game like a 42-28? If it's like a blowout, I think you kind of got Gunter as the favorite in this region. If it's competitive, watch out for Holiday. Toller is up there at the top half of the bracket. We're going to get Toller versus Holiday in the third round most likely, and then Gunter probably against Jacksboro. But kind of walking through that was fun last year because Gunter had their toughest game against Jacksboro last year in their playoff run. So I know Jacksboro is itching to get back there. I think Jacksboro will take care of Scurry Rosser.
Interesting. Toller against Bells. That used to be a game
That's
you
it.
to, but you've had it. You've had it. That's not your adopted squad anymore. Am I right? Yeah, I'm right. You don't even want to talk about it.
It's Honeygrove. Honeygrove is my squad. Now, I got to pick a 2A squad. Squad. So Toller moves up to 3A. They're still Hood County's favorite team. I have a soft spot in my heart from a lot of people in that community. Love me, I love them, but they're in 3A now. So we got to let them do their own thing. We got to let them fly. That's if you love them more, you let them go. I know you know all about that. You let people go all the time. You're just like, go fly. I love you. Go fly.
I'm about ready to let you go, to be honest with you. For this episode of the podcast, that's what I mean. This episode of the podcast, I'm gonna let you go because we got area round action to get to. Hope we got you guys prepped up for it. Next week, we're going to be talking about the regional semifinals. I'm excited. Diggs is excited. You'll see him at a game. Maybe he'll stick his head up the press box to wave at some of you folk. Of course, will be on the sidelines. You can talk to me whenever you want to. Will I talk back? Probably so. I'm a kind guy. Kind fella. Don't listen to what Diggs says about me. All right, Diggs, we'll see you next week.
What's your fantasy this week, Ward?
There is no fantasy.
Who'd you pick?
My fantasy is that I actually went 7-4, but that fantasy turned out to be a nightmare. I went 4-7. Okay. Fantasy. All right. I'll talk to you later, Diggsy. See you.